Greetings and welcome back to WebbedNostalgia. So far we have covered Drake and Josh, the 90s Spider-Man, and even Peter K's car share with really massive reactions off you guys. But today we cover one of the biggest shows that was known in WebbedNostalgia's intro video, and that is Skins. So personally prior to this I have never seen Skins. It was one of those shows I would hear people talk about and praise from the sky above. And well, I'm going to give my initial thoughts on it, and so is Sean, a person who has a lot of knowledge about it. We hope with this series we can bring new people to watch the series exactly as we did with Car Share, and give existing fans an interesting in-depth video on it. So let's start. If you haven't already seen Skins, we will leave spoiler time points so you don't get spoiled in the video in the description.
So with that being said, we are going to go through this show's plot points, and we'll be talking about the characters, but just before we fully get into this is my overall summary of what the overall show is about. Skins shows the lives of teenagers growing up in Bristol, which is in England, who all go through 2 years of sixth form at Roundville College, featuring stories of substance abuse, sexual activity, teen pregnancy, eating disorders and mental illness, making an overall show about personality. Every 2 seasons we see a brand new set of cast start in the school, overall creating 6 original series featuring 3 different sets of amateur actors and characters lasting between 2007 to 2012, with even having a small 7th season with return of some characters from the first 4 seasons. Today we focus on the first season, which focuses on our first set of characters, or as many fans like to call it, our first generation. However, a newcomer to the series isn't just Gokuja, we also have Shadavier watch this show with us, so in this video he will also be talking about the episodes overall with us, about the main plot points. So before we get into this, here is Mr. Shadavier introducing himself to you guys.
Sup, I'm Shadavier, and like Gokuja, I'd never seen the series before, so I wasn't sure what to expect from it. All I heard from Another Geek 123 was that it was really well written and it was a good series. And to be honest, this might be up there with some of my favourite shows. Anyway, back to Gokuja.
Now with that being said, we will go over all the major plot points in the first series and the overarching story which comes with each episode. So I will start off with episode 1. In episode 1 we are introduced to Tony, a typical teenager who comes up with a plan to lock his dad out of the bathroom, which works thanks to a cocky attitude and a wink to a naked neighbour. Later on in the episode, before we are introduced to 2 new main characters, we see the whole cast being called by Tony, who is trying to help Sid lose his virginity. We meet Chris, the one who's lucky with the ladies, Sid, who is a lazy fuck and won't get out of bed, Jal, who is strict and a very talented musician, Anwar, who is a Muslim and is praying, Maxie, who is a gay tap dancer, and lastly Michelle, who is getting all the plan to come together by saying she would help Sid lose his virginity. After this, Sid's dad, who I was surprisingly surprised was played by Peter Capaldi, gets angry after Tony says Sid is missing an exam and he chucks a phone at him, to which Tony says he's going to lose his virginity tonight to someone. And when he says Michelle is helping, he misinterprets this as her wanting to have sex with him. Shortly after this we see Michelle and our second character, who is Tony, trying to help Sid lose his virginity. Sid shows a thing for Michelle, or nips as Tony calls her, something that becomes common in the series. After this we find out that Tony is trying to get Sid laid by someone who he knows has mental problems, and tells him to get spliffed, to which Sid reads the thing he gave him, and he has to go to a man named Mad Twatter. After this, Sid meets the man after an altercation between a woman that does jobs I can't say on YouTube. Shortly after this we see Tony meet a girl called Abigail, after he auditions for a choir and she invites him to a party. After this we see a confrontation between the Mad Twatter and Sid, after he got the big green dub mixed up. Yes, that was a Dragon Ball reference there. Yeah, if you don't know that then it's not my fault. And he got too much, and he has to sell it or else he risks his balls being chopped off, literally. Before he heads back to class we see a confrontation between Chris and his psychology teacher, and he has something clearly for her, which she doesn't see. After this, Sid returns to school and finds out that they didn't need that many drugs as there weren't as many people coming. Tony was trying to call him to call off the deal, but he didn't pick up. Later on we go to nighttime and see the party that Abigail is hosting. We meet the girl who Michelle is trying to help Sid with, Cassie, who isn't as stable as Sid once thought. We see them enter into the posh girl's home and meet a posher version of the Skins cast, which is ironic. Later after this we see Sid and Cassie talk in the kitchen, where she is arranging objects. After this, Sid and Cassie go into the garden on a trampoline, and he finds out that Cassie is taking sleeping pills, to which results in all of them having to go and rush to hospital. But then Cassie wakes up and they don't need to anymore. The episode then cuts to Anwar needing to have a piss, and whilst they are all watching, Tony knocks the handbrake, and they all go flying into the river, along with the 3 ounces of the bad substance I can't see on YouTube. And Sid honestly feels scared, knowing that Mad Twatter will try and do something to him, and the episode ends with them all together formed as a group of friends, or rolled like a pair of skins.
Episode 2 then starts off with Cassie waking up in Michelle's house, which is messed up from a party the night before. As she looks around the house, we then see her go into the kitchen and look at the candle which says Michelle's mum comes back on the 13th. She then asks Amma, who is outside praying, if that's the day, and he says he thinks it is. She then goes upstairs to warn Michelle, but she just gets called a crazy bitch, since Michelle is half asleep. She then kisses a Sid who was asleep and walks out the house to find Michelle's mum unpacking from a honeymoon with her young boyfriend Malcolm, who is played by Danny Dyer. Well, as she walks away, we can hear Michelle's mum screaming as we see the other main characters run out the house half naked. Later on, we see Cassie is on the bus and finds a post-it note on her saying eat, and this results in her noticing everyone on the bus is also eating. When she gets home, we then see her family. Her dad is a painter and her mum is model, and her little brother is a young toddler who gets focused on way more than her. Cassie then looks after her young brother and then gets an unknown number texting her to eat until she then takes a pill. Later on, she then goes outside to go to a rehab clinic, and then we meet Alan, Cassie's taxi driver, who is into grime music and seems to support her a lot more than her parents. When she gets there, we see she passes all of her tests to get discharged, and then we see her final group session where we see Madison Twatter is there and he explains his situation with Sid from the first episode, showing he has his ID card from the 6th form, saying he is not letting it go no matter what anyone says. Soon after that, we then see Sid at the college, and well, he gets teased by Maxie, Anwar, Chris and the character named Posh Kenneth, teasing him about the kiss mark from Cassie, and well, Sid just ends up sitting by himself until Cassie sits down and they talk about her being discharged. And well, because she likes Sid, she shows him how she gets away with not eating, resulting in him saying it's fucked up, and she says nobody cares with him saying he does. Maybe with them going to start opening up with each other, but Tony ends up sitting down and winds up Sid for not having a shower, until Cassie knocks over his drink onto his lap, ended up with Posh Kenneth getting punched as he gets laughed at, and both Tony and Sid walk away. We then cut to Tony washing his pants on the dryer in the woman's staff toilet, where he then has an awkward confrontation with a naked Angie, to the point where a worried Sid and a laughing Chris then walk in and run out. Overall, Sid is worried because he found out from Cassie in their conversation that Madison has his ID. After the toilet scene, we then see Cassie look over at Sid at the window, showing she has a massive crush on him. Sid then goes to Angie asking her for help with this whole situation, with her then not sure how to sort the situation out, and he walks away with no help. To be honest, that is what you get with public British school. We also then see kinda flirting between Chris and Angie as well. Then in class, Sid worries about the whole situation to Tony, but Tony doesn't care about the whole situation, with Cassie also getting another text from an unknown number saying eat again. As the class goes on, they get told they will have a substitute teacher next week, resulting in the so-called teacher walking in saying he wants to teach now and get to know everyone in class. And the teacher is Madison, making Sid hide behind his book. After class, Sid then panics about the whole situation and the gang say they'll help him, with them then walking away saying they'll get back to him, a little like Angie, and then he phones his mum panicking. As this happens, Cassie walks outside with a text saying eat again, and then she sees Sid get off his phone. He then thanks Sid for caring, but he turns around and says he hasn't been texting her, and well, he also looks at her phone saying it's empty with no texts. This then makes her run home to where she sees she doesn't belong there, and then she phones someone and goes to the restaurant. When she's there, she talks to Alan, who she rang, and he tells her it's not up to him what she eats. Then she starts eating a burger, knowing that someone actually trusts her, ending the episode on a sweet note.
This is the episode which focuses on Jal Phaser. Originally a minor character from the first couple of episodes, now turned into the main focus for this episode. I'll say that it's very different from a lot of shows where the overarching story revolves around just one character, and it really gives time to flesh out Jal's character as a whole and bring her more into the forefront of the story, making each individual character interesting in their own way. The episode opens with a rather eccentric music teacher who uses a lot of colourful language, with what seems to be her orchestra class. Jel is present, but isn't focused on until it's revealed that she's participating in the Young Musicians Awards, which is a main plot point for this episode. She's originally portrayed as gifted and really without her own set of problems, aside from what is revealed to be her annoying brothers making a rap song. She reacts as every teenager would do, especially if you're trying to practice for significant events, and yells them to shut up. The episode carries on, with a light being shed on her family environment. Her father isn't too caring about her, and seems to resent her for looking like her mother. On top of that, he's working with a singer who he seems to have a bit of a romantic interest in. She makes a few comments about her mother, and this upsets her father, and he seems to be extremely resentful to her father, having a new woman in his life. This portrays her character a little more deeply, as it's hinted that something happened to her mother, for example a failed relationship or a death. Her father's posse taunt him about some of the comments Jel makes, and it seems as though they're old friends. This environment is quite an impactful one to me as a viewer, as it really did set the tone and was a subtle nod to me, without being too on the nose. Jel takes Sid out dress shopping and is very touchy with him. Eventually, they do pick out a dress after much disagreement, and shortly after, the gang ends up getting into the club, after Jel tells the bouncers that they're there to see her. This shows how much they respect Jel's father and, by proxy, Jel, which does indicate that she may be high status within the circle. They buy drinks, sit there for a bit, and a lot of things happen. Cassie buys Sid a drink who doesn't even thank her, as he's too infatuated with Michelle to see that other girls care about him. This portrays Sid as a bit of a dick, in this instance towards Cassie. Once they go off on their own, Sid sits down on the sofa and is clearly down upon being rejected by Michelle again. Jel goes over, leans her head on his shoulder and comforts him. This shows a side of her which was previously unseen. We know that she's a good friend who cares, but she was always really touchy with Sid in particular. But this is where her attitude changes to be a little more affectionate towards Sid. They begin to have a conversation about how Sid really feels about the entire situation with Michelle and Tony. And before they fully get into the talk, a man who was seen previously flirting with Jel sits down next to her and offers Jel into the club. After she rejects, he says that Sid can come, and they reluctantly accept. They go with him, and are led into an alley where Madison Twatter is there to confront them. It turns out that the man is associated with him, and is leading them there as to pay for the consequences of not paying the tick. They smash the clarinet, leaving Sid enraged and Jel devastated. Sid gets beaten up by the brothers, who mistakes Sid for being Madison Twatter and his associate. The brothers then get beaten up, and Jel is unharmed, and then goes to her father's studio, who is seemingly angry at her, and uncaring if she's okay or not. He tells her to clean her room angrily, and she goes to her room. Here she finds a new clarinet. Her father bought her a new clarinet, which is honestly one of the most heartwarming scenes in the series. Even without a note, the subtlety is really appreciated, as some things don't really need to be said. She is seen starting the concert, and the episode ends.
Episode 4 starts off with Chris waking up and he spots that he is erect, as he took a full pack of Viagra and goes downstairs, and realises there is an envelope that his mother had left, and it in fact has £1,000, and she says that she's going to be back in a few days. After this, Chris, thanks to the help of Tony and the others, decides to throw a massive party, and decides to invite his psychology teacher Angie. Later on we see the party in full swing, it's massive, and Sid even tries to get with someone who's immortally drunk. We then cut back to Chris, who asks Angie if she would like to dance. She's hesitant at first, but then allows him to until she realises his erection, and she leaves disgusted and leaves Chris embarrassed. The next day Chris orders pizza, but to his dismay he hasn't got enough money, so has to go searching in his mother's room, to which he finds she's left and taken everything with her, leaving him alone. In dire need of money, Chris along with Sid go to different places trying to sell a CD player, but it doesn't work because it's got a Pop-Tart inside. He then has no option to go to the scrapyard and sell it, but doesn't sell the player. He sells a wheelbarrow instead, which was carrying the CD player. We see Chris being kicked out of his house by a naked homeless man claiming squatters' rights. With nothing left to do, he has to go and walk to Angie's, who is at school, and she helps him out. Later on after this, Jel tells Chris to see his dad, which he is reluctant to do, but he does so. So he ends up at the house where he meets his stepmother, who is glad to see him. When his father comes home and she tells him that his actual son is here, he doesn't want anything to do with him, and this results in Chris running to a graveyard where it was revealed that he has an older brother called Peter, and that he was dead. Chris tells Jel that he knows his mother is still around because she left flowers by Peter's grave, Now more depressed than ever, Chris is surprised to find that Angie has found a new place for him in Roundview College student accommodation. He moves into his new flat graciously with his few possessions and gets a new goldfish which he keeps in a pint glass.
Episode 5 starts off with a distracted Sid in a meeting with his parents and teacher, as he gets told he has failed his history class, but he has got an extension to get a better grade. This then makes Sid's father, played by Peter Capaldi, flip at him in the halls, tell him to get to his next class in drama, then he is grounded until he gets his coursework done. However, when Sid gets there, Anwar and Maxie persuade him to bunk off to have a smoke, and he eventually agrees. Cassie also stops them for a second, reminding them about their date, which is on that night, and he explains how he is grounded, and she says she will just visit him sometime later on in the night. We then cut to Tony and Michelle talking on a bench outside, as he tells her he has a quiet concert on the night, saying she will go with Sid there. Later on, Sid then starts to study history at his house, with his dad confiscating all of his stuff, and while Sid decides to waste his time by having a good time lying in his bed, to a hidden picture he has of Michelle, until Tony walks in the room. Tony then tells him that Sid has to go to the concert tonight, and also writes a section of Sid's coursework for him, and this is to try and get him to go with him. Sid then gets changed into the only wash shirt he has in the house, and then sneaks out as his parents argue downstairs. Then as time passes, Sid, Michelle and Chris arrive at the concert. Chris is there because he has an odd thing for choir girls. After Tony is done with his section of the show, Michelle and Sid then catch Tony cheating on Michelle with Abigail, and well, she storms out angry, with Tony saying he did it for him, and then Sid goes on to follow her. Outside in the streets, Michelle then gets into trouble with female chavs, and Sid then somewhat saves her, resulting in him being battered by them, while he also gets pissed on by a homeless man. Sid then gets home and stands up to his dad, as he then goes on to go to bed in a mess. And while Cassie is in the bedroom, making it look like he had lied to her earlier, getting a slap and getting told everything is his choice. In the morning, Sid then gets driven to sixth form by his mum, as she tells him to make it easier on his dad. At school, Sid then has another talk with his teacher, and gets wound up about being beaten up. And then he tells Tony that he is mad, and he then phones Michelle as Cassie hears as she hides. Sid then meets up a bruised Michelle at a bar, as Cassie eats a burger, and as Michelle tells Sid he is better than Tony, they both start to dance, as we see Cassie starts to take pills and alcohol on a bench. But as they dance, Tony also comes along and gets back with Michelle, telling Sid to go away quietly. Sid then goes to eat a burger by himself until he tries to call Cassie. He then gets answered by a worried Jal in an ambulance saying Cassie has overdosed. Sid then goes to the hospital to see her, but when he goes there he gets told to go away by Jal, saying all he had to do was go on a date with Cassie. Sid then goes home and discovers his mum has left his dad, making him flip at his dad with the same comments his dad said to him at the start of the episode. Then the episode ends with Sid blanking Tony on the phone as he gets on with his coursework, getting it done, and his dad returns his things.
Episode 6 starts out with the entire psychology class going to Russia. They're on a plane and Sid has snuck drugs up his ass. They arrive at Russia, with Anwar getting searched. Tom ends up bribing the officers, which really sets the scene for the entire episode. They get to their place of residence after hitchhiking on the back of a truck, which is a bit less than desired, and the gang will get settled in. Max and Anwar talk for a bit when he finds a drawing from Maxie of his dick. Anwar acts quite homophobic, saying that it's sick, which then upsets Max. He leaves Anwar's room to sleep in Tony's room, and Tony takes advantage of this and attempts to hook up with him. And it really shows Tony's true character, and that he's willing to take advantage of people to get what he wants. And his lack of care towards Michelle. It really does paint him to be a bit more malicious in this light. Anwar ends up seeing a woman, tells the gang who are getting ready to eat, and they all take a look and she's gone. They don't believe him, of course, and they all go to bed. Chris visits Angie to kiss her goodnight and leaves, with Anwar seeing the same Russian girl at a window, who waves at her and goes off to sleep. The next day, Anwar sees Maxi, who calls him a hypocrite for choosing when his religion is to be followed and when it's not, going back to the comment that Anwar made about homosexuality being sick, following it when it doesn't inconvenience him, and that he makes exceptions for everything but his best friend. Maxi is extremely upset, and accidentally walks in on Chris and Angie having sex. He ends up waking the woman who owns the house, and recognises Maxi's t-shirt, which has Neil Diamond in it. They have a drink and Maxi talks about his problems with Anwar to her, which is a really, really sweet scene. Jel and Michelle go out to get drinks and talk, while Sid and Anwar smuggle the girl that Anwar was staring at because her father was hitting on her. Sid ends up getting chased, and Anwar takes her back to his room. He starts speaking to her, and it turns out the girl's name is Anka, and she had learned English from a show in the US. They then have sex, and they're seen coming out. They see her father, who is revealed to be Anka's husband. He aims a shotgun at Anwar, and Maxi stops them. They then have to leave as the armed response fees are too large. Anwar and Maxi talk, but Anwar isn't having any of it. Maxi returns to Tony's room, who makes sexual advances towards him. Maxi gives in, not knowing that Michelle is watching. Maxi is disappointed and says that he's found something that Tony isn't good at. He then leaves. Ang then get on the plane, with Michelle asking what Tony has to say to her, trying to get him to own up and be honest for once. The episode ends there, with the police, Anka and her husband, being a part of a plan to take money from tourists.
Episode 7. The episode starts with the aftermath from episode 6 of where Tony kissed Maxi. Michelle is still quite angry at Tony for doing this, and she breaks up with Tony for not confessing that he cheated on her. Both Jal and Maxi try to apologise, but they are both met with a rather angry Michelle, not willing to accept their apologies. Tony is still confident Michelle will come back. Later on after the trip went haywire and they got kicked out of Russia, Angie is trying to avoid Chris by hiding in a broom cupboard, to where she finds Michelle getting drunk on vodka, and after they have a moment, Chris comes barging in, resulting in Angie having to take both of them home. After she drops Michelle off, she once again ends up having sex with Chris. We see Michelle return home, and both her mother and her boyfriend both criticise the whole situation. The next day we see a rather mean-spirited Tony read out an essay all about the roles of sex in relationships, both embarrassing Michelle and revealing to the whole class that Tony actually did fellatio with Maxi, after Maxi pipes it up, along with a very lovesick Chris also nearly says that he loves Angie. Angie stops him before he can even say it, and says that what Tony did was cruel and that he should be ashamed of himself. Shortly after this, Jal informs Michelle about Tony's various flings with other girls during their relationship, including with Abigail Stock. Michelle picks a fight with Abigail in front of her friends, but Abigail's brother Josh breaks up the fight. He takes an interest in Michelle, but she attempts to use Sid as a rebound instead. However, Sid realizes he cannot have sex with Michelle because he is in love with Cassie. Sid's father walks in on them hugging on their bed and is pleased to see that Sid is not gay. He and Michelle go to visit Cassie at the psychiatric hospital, but he is dismayed to find out that Cassie has a new boyfriend and is now celibate. At the hospital, Michelle runs into Josh and he asks her out. Michelle happily accepts, but her happiness is shortly lived when she gets into another argument at home with her stepfather. On her date with Josh whilst in bed, Michelle learns that he is mentally unstable and is on drugs to help him with his anger. However, she has had sex with him and excitedly makes plans to see him. Back at home, Michelle finds Malcolm preparing to leave her mother and cynically notes that it is her mother's shortest relationship yet, to which he gets pissed off. After this, we find out that Tony took pictures of Josh's sister and in a sick and twisted betrayal sends them to Josh's phone, which he managed to retrieve off someone that he knows. Michelle sees this and feels sickened by not listening to Josh before. To cheer herself up over Josh, Michelle and Jal head to the bars together. When they bump into Malcolm, he admits that he is contemplating returning, and Michelle encourages him to do so, and offers him some advice, as she didn't like seeing her mother distressed or unhappy. At her house, Michelle bumps into Tony, who tells her he is sorry and loves her. He begs her to take him back, and promises to change, though she forgives him. She firmly refuses to take him back, saying she'll see him around. And the episode ends with Michelle taking charge finally.
Episode 8 starts off with the Stoneham family around the dinner table for Tony's dad's birthday, resulting in the father and son having an odd conversation about thighs. Later on in this evening, they then play a board game. After the game, Effie, Tony's younger muted sister, then is upstairs burning the game pieces and returning the rest of the game to her dad. We then cut to Tony ringing the gang and then getting told he can't join them due to different lies. He then also hides in Effie's covers as their parents come to check on her since she has gone out to party like episode 1. Then we cut to Effie on the bus with her gobby friend as she teases an old man in an odd seat. They then head out to the party location, which ends up being a storage unit, which is closing the next day, and then they meet the runner of the party, who isn't the fat worker. It's a young lad named Spencer. Meanwhile, Tony is rejected by everyone again as he's on the phone in the streets, and even gets a magazine seller even telling him he doesn't want him around, showing he has badly messed up. We then cut to Effie and Spencer snogging as the police arrive at the party and arrest them, and Tony then gets dragged saying he has to collect her. But as he arrives there, he then gets told that she has already been picked up, and he walks out seeing her get into a truck with the lads and a friend as he shouts, but then he gets a kick in. Later at the gang's gathering, where they all start making a pyramid out of sugar cubes, Tony walks in asking for Sid, while he also wrecks their night. Sid then walks out to tell Tony to go away, but finds Tony bruised up on the side of his belly as he gets told he has to help him find Effie. The boys then steal Sid's dad's old car and drive to the place where they think she is, but they have no luck as Sid sees Cassie randomly in the streets, which then leads to them arguing with Sid driving away. As this happens, we then see Effie is drugged and knocked out by Spencer and Josh, who has turned out to plan all of this on revenge for Tony. Tony then gets driven by a guy on a motorcycle as Sid phones up Cassie, and they meet at a restaurant where he is at, as Tony arrives at Effie's location and rings Michelle, worrying. Well, as this happens, Sid almost kisses Cassie until Michelle orders him on the phone to find Tony, and while he does, upsetting her. Then we see Tony go through this odd location until he sees Effie knocked out, until Josh beats Tony up and undresses him, telling him to do the things with Effie, since that's what he made Josh look like he did to his own sister, as Spencer says he's going too far. After Tony cries, Josh then laughs and says he can go, showing Tony has learnt his lesson, resulting in a half-naked Tony carrying the knocked out Effie as Sid drives up to them, and they then take her to hospital. Then at the hospital, Tony, Sid and Tony's parents get told it was clean drugs, which then makes them flip at Tony even though he didn't do anything wrong in that instance, making Sid stand up to them. As they go into the hall, Tony explains himself to Sid, saying he wants to improve himself, as they have a coffee, and well, the episode ends with them both being alright again.
Episode 9 starts off with Anwar's birthday. His parents greet him to find him naked in his room. In a pretty hilarious scene, Max calls him and wishes him a happy birthday, but says that it'll only come out if he tells his parents that he is gay. He goes downstairs to greet his family, and then the episode properly starts. Sid is seen writing an emotional letter to Cassie, realising that he genuinely has feelings for her after being a bit of a dick. Cassie is then writing a letter to Sid, explaining how she feels about him. She's moving to Scotland to receive treatment, but she doesn't want to play games with him, and that he's ruined the relationship between them both. Connor did like this twist personally, as it was very emotional, and the duality between the two as the scenes happen at the same time is really cool and well written into the series. Sid is seen leaving the house, then the scene cuts to Angie and Chris in bed together with someone at the door. But who could it be? None other than Merv, who is revealed to be Angie's fiance, something that she actually never told Chris prior. It cuts to Anwar with his dad asking where Maxie is. He asks about Max too. He tells his father about the fight, who tells him not to be an idiot and forgive him. This scene shows a lot about his character, but leaves the viewer hooked as to wonder if he will show the same attitude to forgiving the fact that Maxine is actually gay. Sid's back again, reaching the hospital, but he's late. Anxious, he sounds a bit mad. He then gets put in a padded room as if he was severely mental. This scene is kind of comedic and it shifts the tones as it's not too abrupt. I'd even go far to say that it adds to the realistic portrayal of how life as a teen is, because not everything is dire or serious. Chris is having a joint to calm himself down, clearly upset as he genuinely does have feelings for Angie, aside from purely sex. He speaks to Merv, asking him who he is. Michelle joins Effie, who's still silent on the bench. Michelle attempts to comfort her and then asks why Tony only cares about her. and asks why he lies to her all the time. Tony is watching the videos of them all together and is trying to call her, but she doesn't pick up. He seems genuinely upset about the fact that she might be gone. He begins to cry. This is the first time we've actually really seen Tony vulnerable over someone other than Effie. The party is in full swing, with Max looking over it somberly. The party goes on. Anwar, being an absolute player, pulls a girl there. Cassie and the other girls escape and want to go to Anwar's party. Sid gets out with the help of Tony, who has nicked his dad's car. I'm sure Peter Capaldi will not be that happy, which shows that he is on the manipulative side for good, rather than the torment of his friends. Anwar takes the girl to meet Maxie, who reveals that he is gay to his dad. He forgives Maxie and says that God will eventually give him the answers for which that he does not understand. It's a pretty sweet scene, and the tension that builds up actually left Connor and me in suspense for the most of the episode. Tony and Sid finally arrive, with Tony giving the letter to Cassie, who walks off with it. The rest of the gang end up partying, with Merv arriving to confront Chris about a ring that he stole early on. He eventually gives it back when Angie tells him to give it back, showing that she brings the good out of him. And then Chris gets punched by Merv, and a brawl ensues. Tony is seeking forgiveness from Michelle, which overly seems to be the theme of the finale, with the plot points being relatively similar to each other. He admits he acted wrongly towards her, and says he can change. Michelle is speechless, and Tony says he loves her, and before he can explain himself fully, he gets hit by a truck. The following scene is harrowing, with Sid nearly in tears at how he can't find Cassie, and he goes home on the bus. All of the characters begin singing while whirled. Cassie reads Sid's letter, and after getting in the taxi, Effie is crying, holding her brother in her arms. Maxie befriends one of Mer's friends, and Posh Kenneth is being held by Jel. A flashback between Sid and Cassie is shown to be going somewhere. Angie is looking down at Chris, whose face is bruised. Cassie is reading the letter at the place she took the pills. Sid then comes and sits down next to her and holds her hand, in a really touching but short reconciling scene.
Anyway guys, that has been the overall plot points of each episode of Skins UK, and now we are overall going to talk about the characters in Gen 1, and overall about what they do in this season. I will quickly talk about 3 characters, Gokuja will talk about 3 characters himself, and then finally Shadowvia will talk about 2 characters. So first, Tony Stolen. Tony represents himself to be the perfect person to people at the start. He is overall a popular kid. He is smart, handsome according to a lot of girls, at first loved by his friends, and gets away with anything by his parents. However, we soon found out this is all a cover up, and well, he uses his manipulative ways to do this, which at first are not noticed by certain people, for example Michelle and Sid. An example of this is that he's Michelle's boyfriend, but well, he goes around cheating on her with other people like Abigail, and well, even at one point Maxie, who is a part of the group. Do you see this part of his personality at the start of the show? By some comments, but it just seems to look like a cheeky type of person, not a manipulative person. However, Tony does see his errors in his way, and realises that he doesn't need to pretend to be someone to people, making him try to do the right thing, until he gets hit by a bus. Next is Michelle Richardson. Michelle overall at the start is just Tony's girlfriend, while even having a plot point of Sid even having a crush on her at the first, but she is well aware of him. She doesn't exactly show many talents in the first season. Overall, we do see she is smart with how to make herself look pretty for boys, and mainly for Tony. However, we do start to see her start to become an overall independent person, not needing to be someone's main object. Finally for me, Sid Jenkins. Sid is essentially at the start is a loser who feels the need to always be with Tony, even with desperately wanting to lose his virginity, so he doesn't seem too embarrassing. He also has a crush on Michelle, who is Tony's girlfriend, which makes him oblivious to Cassie's overall love for him at first. However, we gradually see Sid become more independent while making things right with Tony, and finally committing to Cassie as she moves to Scotland.
Now on to Cassie Ainsworth. Cassie at the start is a character who suffered from an eating disorder, while having other mental problems such as OCD and etc. Well, after she gets out of rehab, she develops love for Sid. Overall, Cassie very much wants to fix herself, which then makes her want to move to Scotland for treatment, as her and Sid eventually get into a relationship. Next, Chris Miles. Chris overall at the start is a party animal, and well, after his mother leaves, he is forced to live more independently, while accidentally wasting the money that was left for him. Chris also has a crush for his teacher Angie, which well, does lead into a brief relationship before her own marriage problems get in the way. Overall, Chris is not sure what to do with his problems, such as this, while joking it off and putting himself on pills, which is shown to come from his family problems from his brother's death. Finally for me is Jel Fraser. Jal overall is a strict musician. She spends most of her time practicing the clarinet for the competition of the Musician of the Year. She also lives with her dad, who is known as a well-retired rapper, and her two brothers, Leighton and Ace, who are also trying to become rappers. From her mother's absence, she overall doesn't have the closet relationship with her father, but we do see they care for each other. Overall, from this, she can be strict and moody to people, but by the end of the season, she seems to be open a lot more, and seems to have a lot more fun. Now on to Maxie Oliver. Maxie is an openly gay person who loves the art of dance. He also cares for his friends, also being curious and at times caring for their problems, especially his best friend Anwar, who has been falling out with him, but overall they make up and put their beliefs aside. Then we go on to Anwar Karari. Anwar overall is a Muslim boy with a strict family. He also at times can be criticised about his selective approach to his faith. He attributes a bit to his dislike of gay people. He doesn't like the fact that his friend Maxie is gay, so he doesn't believe in gay people due to his actual religion, and he is actually against sex, alcohol and drugs. This is especially bad when he actually is called out by Maxie, who says that he's done all of these, but eventually puts his belief to the side to be best friends with Maxie again, even telling his dad Maxie is gay, which would have been a hard thing to do. So that's the end of our discussion of Skins Series 1. Next time we tackle Series 2 of Gen 1 of Skins. Thanks to ShadowVA for being involved in this video. Look out for more videos starring him on the channel very soon. And with that being said, we have been WebbedNostalgia. Thank you once again for reliving the nostalgia. And from me and another Geek 123, we will see you all later, and peace. Jesus Christ, Skin Series 1 must be very over the top, but Skin Series 2, from what I've heard of Connor and Sean, it's gonna be even worse. Drama!